Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves transported back to a bustling medieval village. You're there, knee-deep in mud, chickens squawking at your feet, the air thick with the smells of wood smoke and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly a priority. You feel a rumble in your stomach, a primal urge for sustenance. Life is hard, predictable, and the average lifespan. Something you probably won't survive this very year, statistically speaking. But fear not, for amidst this chaos, there's a superfood, a humble staple that keeps bellies full and the medieval world turning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the muddy path, your worn leather boots sinking with each step. The village is a hive of activity, blacksmiths hammering, weavers hunched over their looms, and farmers tending to their fields. But what catches your eye is the sheer abundance of one particular crop. Everywhere you look, it's there, stacked high in granaries, drying on rooftops and simmering in enormous cauldrons. It's beans. Yes, beans. Not exactly the most glamorous superfood, is it? No Instagram influencers touting their bean smoothies, and no celebrity chefs raving about bean-infused water. But back then, beans were king. They were the backbone of the medieval diet, the unsung hero of survival. Historians still argue whether the reliance on beans was simply a matter of necessity or a calculated nutritional strategy, but there's no denying their impact. Imagine a world where meat is a luxury, reserved for the nobility and special occasions. Vegetables are seasonal and unreliable, susceptible to frost and drought. What's a peasant to do? Enter the humble bean. Packed with protein, fiber, and essential nutrients, beans provided the energy and sustenance needed to endure long days of backbreaking labor. They were the original slow-release energy bar, keeping you going from dawn till dusk. You watch as a woman stirs a massive pot of bean stew over an open fire. The aroma fills the air, a hearty and comforting scent that promises warmth and satisfaction. She ladles a generous portion into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. It's thick and chunky, with bits of vegetables and herbs mixed in. You take a bite. It's surprisingly flavorful, earthy and satisfying. You feel your energy levels rising. Beans weren't just a source of sustenance, they were also incredibly versatile. They could be boiled, roasted, mashed, or ground into flour. Bean flour was used to make bread, cakes, and even pasta. In fact, some historians believe that the popularity of pasta in Italy is directly linked to the availability of beans as a cheap and plentiful source of protein and carbohydrates. Think about that next time you order spaghetti bolognese. It's basically a bean-powered dish. And get this, beans even played a role in medieval warfare. Armies relied on beans to feed their soldiers during long campaigns. They were easy to transport, didn't spoil quickly, and provided the necessary fuel for marching, fighting, and conquering. You might say that beans were the secret weapon of the Middle Ages. Imagine a siege, arrows raining down, trebuchets launching rocks, and the defenders huddled behind the walls, munching on beans. Of course, beans weren't without their drawbacks. They could be, shall we say, a bit gassy. Medieval people were well aware of this side effect and had their own remedies for dealing with it. Herbs like fennel, dill, and caraway were often added to bean dishes to help reduce flatulence. One can only imagine the social gatherings, filled with polite conversation interspersed with the occasional, shall we say, acoustic outburst. Speaking of remedies, beans were also used medicinally. They were believed to have healing properties and were used to treat a variety of ailments, from skin conditions to digestive problems. Some even believed that beans could ward off evil spirits. Although I can't confirm or deny that. As the sun begins to set, you find yourself back in the village square, surrounded by the sights and sounds of medieval life. You've learned a lot about the humble bean and its importance in this world. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things are the most essential. It's also a reminder that history is often hidden in the everyday things we take for granted. We tend to focus on the kings and queens, the battles and conquests, but the real story of the past is often found in the food people ate, the clothes they wore, and the tools they used. These seemingly insignificant details can tell us a lot about how people lived, worked, and survived in a world that was very different from our own. You notice a group of children playing in the dirt, their faces smeared with mud and laughter. They're chasing each other around, pretending to be knights and dragons. Despite the hardships and challenges of medieval life, there's a sense of joy and community that's palpable. And you realize that, even though life was tough, it was also full of simple pleasures, a warm fire, a hearty meal, and the companionship of friends and family. And you're thankful for that bowl of bean stew, because you know there are some things that transcend time itself. The need for sustenance, the desire for community, and the simple joy of being alive. You wouldn't trade it for anything. Well, perhaps a slightly more modern bathroom, but otherwise, you're good. Now that your belly is full and your mind is filled with the stories of beans and medieval life, it's time to consider the world beyond the bowl. Historians still debate just how interconnected the medieval world was, but evidence suggests that trade routes, and therefore, bean varieties and preparations, spread far and wide. So, you never know, the beans you're consuming tonight might be descendants of those very same medieval superfoods that sustained entire civilizations. Now that's something to ponder as you drift off to sleep. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk roots. Specifically, the root. You know, the one that's earthy, grounding, and probably sitting in your crisper drawer right now, judging you for ordering takeout again. I'm talking about the humble carrot. You're probably picturing that bright orange, perfectly formed specimen you get from the grocery store. But let me tell you, that's not how it all started. Oh no. The carrot story is a long and winding one, much like trying to navigate a produce aisle on a Saturday morning. You trudge back in time, past the invention of the internal combustion engine, past the rise of industrial empires. Keep going, think medieval banquets, with roasted meats and flagons of ale. You can almost smell it, can't you? A faint whiff of hops and questionable hygiene. Deeper, still. Back before printed books and Gothic cathedrals. Now, you find yourself in ancient times. Imagine yourself trudging across the arid lands of what is now Afghanistan and surrounding regions. You see a plant, but it's not quite the vibrant orange beacon you're accustomed to. This, my friend, is Daucus carota, the wild ancestor of the modern carrot. It's scraggly, pale, and probably tastes like dirt. Yum! These early carrots were typically white or purple, thin and forked like an angry wizard's beard. The roots were cultivated not for their sweetness, because, trust me, they weren't sweet, but for their aromatic leaves and seeds. Think of them more as an herb, like parsley or cilantro, rather than a root vegetable. You might nibble on them, but you wouldn't be making carrot cake anytime soon. It's a bit like that one time you tried to make coffee with chicory because you were out of grounds and feeling adventurous. A noble experiment, perhaps, but definitely not the same. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for cultivating these early carrots was purely culinary or if medicinal properties played a significant role. You see, in ancient cultures, plants were often used for both food and healing. Carrots were no exception. They were thought to possess properties that could help with all sorts of ailments, from digestive issues to, shall we say, matters of the heart. You can almost picture an ancient apothecary, grinding carrot seeds into a fine powder, whispering incantations under his breath. Probably something like, "Please, let this cure his condition." Or at least make him smell a little better. The early cultivation of carrots was a slow and deliberate process. Farmers, if you can call them that, were more likely just people who happened to be growing things at the time. You can picture them carefully selecting plants with slightly larger, less bitter roots, saving the seeds, and planting them again. Over generations, this selective breeding led to gradual improvements in the carrot size, shape, and taste. A kind of horticultural Darwinism, if you will. Speaking of Darwin, did you know that Charles Darwin, the father of evolution, was a keen gardener? He even studied the effects of cross-pollination on different plant species. I wonder what he would have thought of the modern, perfectly uniform carrot. He probably would have marveled at it. Or maybe he would have preferred the wild, untamed version, a reminder of nature's chaotic creativity. Now, you might be wondering, how did the carrot make its way from the arid lands of Central Asia to the rest of the world? Well, that's where trade routes come in. The Silk Road, that famous network of trade routes that connected the East and West, played a crucial role in spreading the carrot and other crops across vast distances. Imagine camel caravans laden with silks, spices, and, yes, carrots, slowly making their way across deserts and mountains. And it wasn't just the Silk Road. As civilizations rose and fell, trade and exploration continued to spread the carrot to new lands. The Romans, for instance, were known to cultivate carrots, although they probably weren't quite as enthusiastic about them as they were about, say, conquering Gaul. One quirky fact that often gets overlooked is the role of monasteries in the cultivation and preservation of crops. During the Middle Ages, monasteries were often centers of agricultural innovation. Monks meticulously tended their gardens, experimenting with different varieties of plants and preserving seeds for future generations. They were basically the plant breeders of their time. You can picture them in their habits, carefully tending their carrot beds, murmuring Latin prayers for a bountiful harvest. The journey of the carrot wasn't always smooth sailing, though. There were periods of decline and periods of renewed interest. Sometimes, other vegetables were simply more popular. You can almost hear the carrot lamenting, "But I'm full of vitamins. Don't you want to see in the dark?" Historians still debate the precise timeline of the carrot spread and evolution. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly when and where specific varieties emerged. Historical records are often incomplete or unreliable. And, let's face it, ancient farmers weren't exactly keeping detailed spreadsheets of their carrot yields. But one thing is clear, the early cultivation of the carrot was a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. It took generations of careful selection and breeding to transform the wild, scraggly Daucus carota into the versatile vegetable we know and love today. So, the next time you bite into a carrot stick, take a moment to appreciate its humble beginnings. Remember the pale, forked roots of ancient Afghanistan, the monks tending their gardens, and the camel caravans traversing the Silk Road. Because even the simplest things often have the most fascinating stories to tell. You see, somewhere along the line, something magical happened. Perhaps a genetic mutation, perhaps a particularly skilled farmer with a green thumb and a twinkle in his eye, but the orange carrot as we know it emerged. And when it did, well, it took the world by storm. Or, at least, by carrot cake. Okay, you might be thinking, that's great, but how did this drab root transform into that gorgeous orange beauty that I love to snack on? I demand color. Well, that, my friend, is a tale for another time. It involves Dutch patriotism, royal intrigue, and a whole lot of selective breeding. But for now, just know that the orange carrot is a relatively recent invention, a triumph of horticultural engineering. And on a slightly more modern note, did you know that in some parts of the world, carrots are still used in traditional remedies? For example, in some cultures, carrot juice is believed to be good for the skin and can help to improve vision. You can't help but find it a bit weird that it's a bit like the old wives' tales actually have some truth to it. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's dim the lights a bit, maybe grab a cup of chamomile, because tonight, or, well, whenever you're watching this, we're diving deep. We're going on a culinary and botanical odyssey, a root-bound romp through the ages with a vegetable so unassuming, so often overlooked, that you'd be forgiven for thinking it only exists in old cookbooks or maybe the back of your grandpa's crisper drawer. I'm talking about Salsify. Yes, Salsify. That long, beige, vaguely oyster-flavored root that's been quietly whispering secrets to chefs and gardeners for centuries. So, take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and let's travel back in time, shall we? Imagine yourself, if you will, a medieval traveler. Not one of those fancy, well-dressed lords, mind you. You're more of a humble peasant, perhaps trudging along a dusty road in the Mediterranean region. You're hungry, perpetually hungry, and you're keeping a sharp eye out for anything edible growing wild. You might, just might, stumble upon Salsify. Salsify, in its wild form, isn't exactly a feast for the eyes. It's a rather scraggly plant, with grass-like leaves and unassuming purple or yellow flowers. But the real treasure, of course, lies beneath the soil. The root itself is long and slender, with a tough, brown skin. You'd have to dig it up, clean it, and then, of course, cook it somehow. No microwave meals back then, you know. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks and Romans cultivated salsify with the same enthusiasm they showed for other root vegetables, like turnips and parsnips. Some believe that they were aware of it, perhaps even using it medicinally. After all, Dioscorides, the famous Greek physician, did mention a plant that sounds suspiciously like salsify in his writings. But, let's be honest, the Romans were pretty busy building empires and aqueducts. You think they had time to fuss over a picky root? Pliny the Elder, on the other hand, barely gave it a passing thought, preferring to wax poetic about the glory of the cabbage. Priorities, right? Now, fast forward a few centuries. The Roman Empire has crumbled. The Dark Ages have, well, you know, darkened. You find yourself in a monastery garden, a small oasis of order and tranquility amidst the chaos. Monks, with their dedication to scholarship and self-sufficiency, were crucial in preserving agricultural knowledge during this time. It was through these monastic gardens that many forgotten plants, including salsify, found refuge. You might be helping a robed brother tend to the salsify patch, carefully weeding around the plants and making sure they get enough sun. The monks would likely use it not only for sustenance, but also for its purported medicinal properties. Salsify was believed to be good for all sorts of ailments, from coughs and colds to, and I kid you not, melancholia. Imagine popping a salsify pill for your existential dread. Here's a quirky thought for you: in some medieval monasteries, the monks were forbidden from speaking during certain hours of the day. So, if you wanted to ask your fellow brother how the salsify crop was doing, you'd have to resort to sign language or, perhaps, a series of carefully arranged salsify roots. 2 roots up, 1 root down, bad harvest. As the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, a new spirit of exploration and discovery swept across Europe. Plants, like ideas, began to travel. Salsify started its slow, steady journey northward, carried by traders, travelers, and, of course, gardeners eager to experiment with new and interesting varieties. You can picture yourself now in a bustling market in 16th century Paris. Vendors are hawking their wares, the air is thick with the smell of spices and roasting meats, and amidst the piles of turnips and carrots, you spot a bin of salsify. It's not exactly flying off the shelves, but there's a steady stream of customers, mostly those in the know, the chefs of wealthy households, the apothecaries, and the occasional adventurous home cook. During the Renaissance, salsify gained a bit of traction, especially in France and the Netherlands. It was considered a delicacy, something special to be served at banquets and feasts. It was even mentioned in some of the era's most important botanical texts. Gaspard Bauhin, a prominent Swiss botanist, gave salsify a proper scientific description in his Pinax Theatriae Botanicae, which, let's face it, sounds way more impressive than just a book about plants. Now, for a bit of fringe history, there are whispers, unsubstantiated of course, that Queen Elizabeth I of England was particularly fond of salsify. Legend has it that she had it served at court regularly, prepared in all sorts of elaborate ways. Can you imagine the royal chef, sweating profusely, trying to come up with yet another salsify-based dish to impress the Queen? Your Majesty, might I present, salsify fritters with a saffron aioli? Move forward to the 17th and 18th centuries, the Age of Enlightenment. Science is booming, new technologies are emerging, and even humble vegetables are getting a closer look. You find yourself in the gardens of a grand estate, perhaps somewhere in England or France. You are the head gardener, a man of science and practicality, and you're meticulously tending to your Salsify crop. During this period, Salsify was becoming more widely cultivated. It was no longer just a delicacy for the wealthy, it was finding its way into the gardens of middle-class households as well. Seed catalogs started to feature Salsify varieties, and gardeners were experimenting with different ways to grow and prepare it. Historians still argue whether the increasing popularity of Salsify was due to its unique flavor or its perceived health benefits. Or maybe, just maybe, people were starting to get bored of turnips. Whatever the reason, Salsify was having its moment in the sun. This is when Salsify earned its nickname, the oyster plant. The flavor, when cooked, has a subtle, slightly briny taste that some people find reminiscent of oysters. It's not exactly a perfect match, of course, but it's close enough to spark the imagination. Though, personally, I think calling it the slightly vaguely resembling an oyster plant would be more accurate. Now, the joke: what did the Salsify say to the oyster? Nothing. Salsify can't talk. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and the world was changing rapidly. You are now a farmer in the American Midwest. The vast prairies are being plowed, new technologies are transforming agriculture, and you're trying to make a living growing crops for a rapidly growing nation. Salsify made its way to North America with European settlers. It was initially grown in home gardens, but it never really achieved the same level of popularity as it did in Europe. The problem, perhaps, was that Americans already had plenty of other root vegetables to choose from, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, and parsnips. Salsify, with its somewhat unusual flavor and finicky growing habits, just couldn't compete. However, for a brief moment, Salsify experienced a surge in popularity with the rise of vegetarianism. In a world rapidly shifting away from traditional farming practices, and with growing concerns about animal welfare, some people turned to plant-based diets. So, for a short time, Salsify regained some favor as a vegetable with potential, but it was short-lived. Quirky tidbit: there are stories of some early American cookbooks including recipes for mock oyster stew, using Salsify as a substitute for the real thing. It was a way for vegetarians, or those who couldn't afford oysters, to enjoy a dish that tasted vaguely like the real thing. And finally, we arrive at the 20th and 21st centuries. You are now a modern-day foodie, a culinary explorer constantly on the lookout for new and interesting flavors. You're browsing through a farmer's market, and your eye is caught by a pile of long, beige roots that you've never seen before. What are those, you ask the farmer. Those, he replies, are Salsify. In recent years, Salsify has been experiencing a bit of a revival. Chefs are rediscovering its unique flavor and incorporating it into their dishes. Home cooks are becoming more adventurous, seeking out unusual ingredients to experiment with. You might find Salsify on the menu at a fancy restaurant, served as a puree, a roasted side dish, or even a pickled garnish. One historical fact is that during World War II, when food was scarce, Salsify experienced a bit of a comeback in Europe. People were forced to grow whatever they could in their gardens, and Salsify, with its relatively easy growing habits, became a valuable source of sustenance. Although, I'm sure people were far more excited by things like potatoes, which are far more filling. These days, Salsify remains a niche vegetable. You're unlikely to find it in your local supermarket, unless you live in a particularly adventurous area. But if you're lucky enough to stumble upon it, don't hesitate to give it a try. It might just surprise you. Here's a second joke: why did the foodie cross the road? To try the Salsify dish at the restaurant on the other side. Historians still argue whether Salsify will ever achieve mainstream popularity. Some believe that its unique flavor and nutritional benefits will eventually win people over. Others argue that it's simply too niche, too unusual, to ever become a staple in the American diet. So, there you have it. A whirlwind tour through the history of Salsify, from its humble beginnings in the Mediterranean to its modern-day revival. It's a story of survival, adaptation, and, above all, quiet persistence. It's not a glamorous history, mind you, it's not one filled with kings and queens and battles, but it's a story of a humble root that's quietly fed and nourished people for centuries. A vegetable that reminds us that even the most unassuming things can have a rich and fascinating history. One last quirky tidbit: did you know that Salsify has a milky sap that can stain your hands? So, if you're planning on handling a lot of Salsify, you might want to wear gloves. Or, just embrace the stained hands. It's a badge of honor for a true Salsify enthusiast. One final joke: what's a Salsify's favorite type of music? Root music. And that, my friends, is the end of our journey. I hope you enjoyed our little jaunt through time and taste. Now, go forth and spread the word about Salsify. Maybe, just maybe, you can help this humble root finally get the recognition it deserves. Alright, settle in, let's talk about Salsify. Yes, Salsify. The root vegetable that sounds like something out of a Tolkien novel, but I promise, it's real, and surprisingly, good for you. You might be thinking, oh great, another health food lecture, but trust me, we're going to take it slow. Think of this as a nutritional bedtime story. Except, you're probably not going to fall asleep. Unless my voice really works its magic. And if it does, hey, I'm not judging. So, you trudge through the supermarket, past the kale mountains and the quinoa avalanches. You're looking for something different. Something earthier. Maybe even something a little underground. And there it is, nestled amongst the parsnips and carrots, a root that resembles a dirty, pale finger: Salsify. You might wrinkle your nose. You might even think, what is that? But hold on. Don't judge a book by its rooty cover. Salsify, my friend, is a nutritional powerhouse, packed with vitamins and minerals that could make Popeye jealous. Seriously, this unassuming root is a veritable treasure trove of goodness. And while I won't bore you with a dry recitation of percentages and RDAs, let's just say it's got your back when it comes to feeling, well, less like a wilted lettuce. First off, you're looking at a good source of vitamin C. That stuff that everyone loads up on when they feel a sniffle coming on. Yeah, Salsify's got it. It's like a little immune-boosting hug in a root vegetable form. And who doesn't love a good hug? Especially when it comes disguised as food. Beyond just fighting off colds, allegedly, I'm not a doctor, vitamin C is also crucial for collagen production, meaning it helps keep your skin looking all plump and youthful. So, you could argue that eating Salsify is basically like slathering yourself in expensive face cream, from the inside out. That sounds like a win, doesn't it? Then there's potassium. Oh, potassium. This mineral is essential for maintaining healthy blood pressure. It's like the chill bouncer at the club that is your circulatory system, making sure everything's flowing smoothly and no one's getting too rowdy. Too little potassium can lead to muscle cramps, fatigue, and generally feeling blah. Salsify to the rescue. And don't forget the fiber. Because let's be honest, who gets enough fiber these days? Seriously, it's like the forgotten nutrient. But fiber is crucial for digestive health. It keeps things moving. Prevents, shall we say, unpleasant bathroom experiences. And it helps regulate blood sugar levels, which is important for keeping those energy crashes at bay. No one wants to be hangry, right? So, embrace the fiber, embrace the Salsify. But wait, there's more. Salsify also boasts a decent amount of iron. Iron is vital for carrying oxygen throughout your body. When you're low on iron, you might feel tired, weak, and just generally, blah again. Notice a pattern? Salsify is the antidote to blah. Okay, maybe not the antidote, but it definitely helps. Now, let's talk about the quirky stuff. Because I love the quirky stuff. Did you know that Salsify was once believed to have magical properties? Back in the day, people thought it could ward off evil spirits and cure snake bites. I'm not making this up. I mean, I wouldn't recommend relying on it if you encounter a venomous snake, but hey, a little extra protection never hurt anyone, right? It's like having a tiny, edible talisman in your root cellar. Speaking of history, Salsify has been around for a while. The plant's presence stretches way back. It was cultivated in Europe as early as the 16th century, and it was particularly popular during times of scarcity. It's hardy, easy to grow, and provides a good source of nutrients, so it was a real lifesaver for many communities. Think of it as the historical equivalent of survival food, the OG prepper staple. It wasn't just sustenance, it was security. Plus, it's relatively easy to cultivate in less than ideal conditions. So, when the apocalypse arrives, remember Salsify. You might just thank me later. Now, let's get to something a little more contentious. The taste. The flavor of Salsify is often described as oyster-like. Yes, you read that right. Oyster-like. Which, understandably, might be a bit off-putting if you're not a fan of seafood. But before you write it off completely, give it a chance. It's a delicate, subtle flavor, and it's not quite as briny as an actual oyster. Historians still argue whether the oyster comparison is accurate, or whether it's just a marketing ploy to make Salsify sound more appealing. I mean, earthy root vegetable doesn't exactly scream culinary delight, does it? You can prepare Salsify in a variety of ways. You can boil it, roast it, fry it, sauté it, you can even mash it like potatoes. It's a pretty versatile ingredient, and it can be incorporated into all sorts of dishes. My personal favorite is roasted Salsify with a drizzle of olive oil and a sprinkle of sea salt. Simple, elegant, and delicious. Although, full disclosure, my other favorite is Salsify fries with a spicy mayo dip. I have eclectic tastes, what can I say? Now, a word of warning, Salsify can be a bit of a pain to peel. The skin is thin and papery, and it tends to cling to the flesh. I recommend wearing gloves, because it can also stain your hands. But don't let that deter you. The nutritional benefits are worth the effort. Think of it as a little challenge. A culinary quest. And the reward? A delicious, nutritious meal that will make you feel like a champion. Sort of. And, circling back to those magical beliefs about Salsify, while it may not actually ward off evil spirits, there is a quirky belief around the harvesting of this particular root. Some old-timers swear that Salsify must be harvested only under the light of a full moon to retain its optimal flavor and nutrients. Is there any scientific basis for this? Probably not. Is it fun to imagine a bunch of farmers, cloaked in shadows, digging up Salsify under the moonlight? Absolutely. You know what else is fun? Considering all the things that aren't good for you in our current food climate. It's like a nutritional obstacle course out there. Processed foods, sugary drinks, artificial sweeteners, it's a minefield. And in that context, Salsify is a breath of fresh air. It's a real, whole food that hasn't been processed, refined, or otherwise messed with. It's about as close to nature as you can get without, actually eating dirt. Now, I know what you're thinking, this is all well and good, but where can I find Salsify? That's a fair question. It's not exactly the most common vegetable in the supermarket. You might have to venture to a farmer's market or a specialty food store. But trust me, the hunt is worth it. And once you've found it, you'll feel like you've discovered a secret treasure. You'll be like, I know about Salsify. And you don't. It's a good feeling. I promise. Alright, let's be honest. Are you really going to rush out and buy Salsify tomorrow? Maybe. Maybe not. But hopefully, I've at least piqued your interest. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see that strange, dirty root vegetable in the supermarket, you won't wrinkle your nose. You'll think, hey, that's Salsify. It's a nutritional powerhouse that might even ward off evil spirits. And then, you'll buy it. And you'll try it. And you'll love it. Okay, maybe you won't love it, But you might like it. And that's a start. And if you hate it, well, at least you tried something new. That's what life's all about, right? Trying new things, expanding your horizons, and occasionally eating weird-looking root vegetables. Plus, I tried. I gave it my best shot. I even told you about the magical properties and the oyster-like flavor. What more could you ask for? Now, I'm starting to get a little sleepy myself. Maybe all this talk about Salsify is having a sedative effect. Or maybe it's just the sound of my own voice. I don't know. But I think it's time to wrap things up. So, the next time you're looking for a healthy and interesting addition to your diet, remember Salsify. It's not just a vegetable, it's an adventure. And who knows? It might just become your new favorite thing. Or, it might not. But at least you learned something new today. And that's always a good thing. Alright, settle in, friend. Comfy? Good. Because we're about to embark on a journey. A rooty, earthy journey. A journey, into the world of Salsify. Yeah, I know, you're probably thinking, Salsify. What in the name of heirloom tomatoes is Salsify? Don't worry. Most people haven't even seen Salsify, let alone tasted it. That's okay. That's why you're here, isn't it? To become one of the enlightened, the Salsify savvy. And I'm here to gently guide you. Think of me as your Salsify whisperer. Whispers Salsify. Now, before you completely dismiss it as some forgotten vegetable from your great-grandma's victory garden, let me tell you, Salsify has a story. A surprisingly interesting one, actually. Picture this, it's the 16th century. Queen Elizabeth I is on the throne, Shakespeare's pen is scratching away, and, believe it or not, Salsify is the height of culinary fashion. It was all the rage in Europe. Eaten by royalty, praised by poets, probably even used as a fancy garnish on a medieval charcuterie board. Historians still argue whether it was the unique taste or simply the novelty that drove its popularity. It's like when everyone suddenly got obsessed with kale. Remember that? Anyway. You're probably wondering what it tastes like. Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The most common description? Oysters. Yes, oysters. Hence, one of its nicknames, the oyster plant. A bold claim, I know. But trust me, when cooked, Salsify does have this subtle, almost briny flavor that's, well, it's oysterish. Some people also detect hints of artichoke, or even parsnip, which is probably closer to the truth. But oyster sounds way more intriguing, doesn't it? Now, if you're expecting a full-blown shellfish experience, you'll be disappointed. It's more like, oyster adjacent. Think of it as the vegetarian's revenge on seafood. Speaking of revenge, I once tried to grow oysters in my backyard. Let's just say the local raccoon population was very happy with me, and I learned a valuable lesson about sustainable aquaculture. But enough about history and questionable culinary comparisons. Let's talk about growing the darn thing. You see, cultivating Salsify is a bit of a commitment. It's not exactly the low-maintenance fling you have with, say, radishes. Think of it more as a long-term, deeply involved relationship. You're in it for the long haul. The first thing you need is patience. Lots of it. Because Salsify takes its sweet time. We're talking a good 120 to 150 days from seed to harvest. That's basically half a year. Your pet goldfish has a shorter lifespan than that. So, if you're the kind of gardener who expects instant gratification, maybe stick to something a little less ambitious. Now, before you trudge out to your garden with a packet of Salsify seeds, you need to think about soil. Salsify likes it loose, well-drained, and rich in organic matter. Think fluffy, not clumpy. You want those roots to have plenty of room to stretch out. Amend your soil with compost, well-rotted manure, or whatever your favorite soil amendment happens to be. And make sure it's free of rocks and other debris that could hinder root development. Imagine trying to do yoga in a room full of Legos. Not fun, right? Same goes for Salsify roots. The best time to sow your Salsify seeds is in early spring, as soon as the ground can be worked. That's usually a few weeks before the last expected frost. You can also start them indoors a few weeks earlier, but honestly, Salsify isn't the biggest fan of being transplanted. It's a bit of a drama queen that way. Direct sowing is definitely the preferred method. When you're planting, sow the seeds about half an inch deep and an inch or two apart. Once they germinate, thin them out to about 4 to 6 inches apart. This gives them plenty of room to grow those long, elegant roots. Water them regularly, especially during dry spells. Salsify likes to stay consistently moist, but not waterlogged. Think of it like a well-behaved houseplant. Thirsty, but not drowning in its own sorrow. Now, here's where things get a little interesting. Salsify is a biennial. That means it takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. The first year, it focuses on growing those lovely roots. The second year, it sends up a flower stalk, produces seeds, and then, dies. Dramatic, I know. So, if you want to harvest the roots, you need to do it in the fall of the first year, after the first frost. The frost actually sweetens the roots, making them even more delicious. This is due to the conversion of starches to sugars when exposed to cold temperatures, a trick other root vegetables like carrots and parsnips also pull. Plus, digging them up in the fall gives you something to do besides watching reruns of reality TV. Not that I would know anything about that. When you're harvesting, be careful not to damage the roots. They're long and delicate, and they can break easily. Use a garden fork to gently lift them from the soil. Think of it like excavating a delicate archaeological find. Brush off the dirt and admire your handiwork. You grew that. All by yourself. Okay, maybe with a little help from the sun, the soil, and a healthy dose of patience. Now, if you want to save seeds for next year, you'll need to let a few plants overwinter and flower in the second year. The flowers are actually quite pretty, by the way. They're usually purple or yellow, and they attract all sorts of beneficial insects to your garden. Plus, they'll give the bees something to buzz about. Once the flowers fade, they'll produce fluffy seed heads that look like dandelions. Just wait until the seed heads are dry and brown, then harvest the seeds and store them in a cool, dry place. You know, the usual seed-saving drill. One little known fact about Salsify is its connection to mourning jewelry in the Victorian era. The black, lacquer-like substance used in some of these pieces was made from the root of black salsify, a close relative. Talk about a versatile vegetable. You can eat it, grow it, and wear it as a symbol of grief. And speaking of black salsify, it's worth mentioning that there are actually 2 main types of salsify, white salsify, which is the one we've been talking about, and black salsify. Black salsify has a darker skin and a slightly more intense flavor. Some people prefer it to white salsify, while others find it a bit too earthy. It's all a matter of personal preference. Think of it like coffee. Some people like it black, some people like it with milk and sugar, and some people just like the smell. Now, before you rush out and plant an entire field of salsify, it's important to consider its potential downsides. First, as we've already established, it takes a long time to grow. Second, it's not the easiest vegetable to peel. The skin is tough and sticky, and it can be a bit of a pain to remove. My suggestion? Embrace the imperfection. A little bit of skin never hurt anyone. Plus, it adds character. Another potential problem is that salsify can be susceptible to certain pests and diseases. Aphids, slugs, and carrot root flies are all known to attack salsify. So, keep an eye out for these troublemakers and take action if you see any signs of infestation. You can use organic pest control methods like insecticidal soap or diatomaceous earth to keep them at bay. And remember, a healthy garden is a resilient garden. But despite these challenges, I still think Salsify is worth growing. It's a unique, delicious, and surprisingly versatile vegetable that deserves a place in every adventurous gardener's repertoire. Plus, it's a great conversation starter. Imagine serving a dish of roasted Salsify to your guests. They'll be like, "What is this mysterious and delicious root vegetable?" And you'll be like, "Ah, yes, that's Salsify. Let me tell you all about it." You'll be the most interesting person at the dinner party. Guaranteed. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some parts of Europe, Salsify is traditionally eaten on New Year's Eve, as it is believed to bring good luck for the coming year. So, if you're looking for a unique way to ring in the new year, ditch the champagne and break out the Salsify. It's certainly more memorable. You could even wear black Salsify jewelry to double down on the luck. Just be careful not to accidentally eat your earrings. But, what if you're just tired of the garden variety carrot and are looking to spice things up a bit? Well, Salsify has you covered. It's like the parsnip's cooler, more mysterious cousin. It's got that subtle oysterish flavor, it's got history, it's got the quirky association with morning jewelry. What's not to love? And remember, every time you bite into a piece of Salsify, you're not just eating a vegetable. You're eating a piece of history, a piece of culture, a piece of, well, you get the idea. So, there you have it. A beginner's guide to cultivating Salsify. Now, get out there and get planting. And don't forget to send me pictures of your Salsify creations. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Now, before you go, I feel I should warn you, gardening can be addictive. It starts with a few innocent Salsify seeds, and before you know it, you're building raised beds, composting like a pro, and talking to your plants. But hey, there are worse addictions to have. Now, are you asleep yet? No. Well, I've got plenty more vegetable growing tips where that came from. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's talk Salsify, shall we? Yeah, that vaguely parsnip-looking root vegetable that probably occupies the dusty corner of your grocery store you usually avoid. But trust me, it has a story. A long story. We're going all the way back to the Middle Ages. Imagine, if you will, that you trudge through the muddy lanes of a medieval village. The air hangs thick with the smell of wood smoke and, let's be honest, unwashed bodies. You're on your way to market, hoping to snag some ingredients for tonight's dinner. Maybe some cabbage, perhaps a bit of Salsify. Now, you might be thinking, Salsify. Why not a nice turnip? Or, actual food. Well, my friend, in the medieval world, Salsify was actually pretty popular. It wasn't exactly a peasant staple, but you'd find it gracing tables, even in the grand halls of castles, believe it or not. It was respected. Even loved by some. You eye a stall piled high with root vegetables. The vendor, a burly fellow with a suspicious stain on his tunic, gestures towards a bunch of long, slender roots. Finest Salsify in the county, governor, he proclaims, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. You, skeptical modern soul that you are, wonder if he's trying to pull a fast one on you. After all, this is the same era where doctors prescribed leeches for pretty much everything. You carefully examine the Salsify, looking for signs of rot or, well, anything that looks remotely appetizing. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you decide to buy some. Congratulations, you're about to embark on a culinary adventure, of sorts. Back in your humble dwelling, or perhaps your slightly less humble manor kitchen, you'll need to prepare this root. First, a good scrubbing is in order. Medieval hygiene, as we all know, wasn't exactly top-notch. You wouldn't want any stray bits of, well, you get the idea. Then comes the peeling. And here's where the fun begins, or perhaps ends, depending on your tolerance for sticky situations. Salsify, when peeled, releases a milky sap that can stain your hands a delightful shade of brown. Think of it as nature's temporary tattoo. Some medieval cooks wisely used gloves made of thick leather, but let's be real, those probably smelled worse than the sap. Historians still argue whether the benefits of gloves outweighed the unpleasantness of wearing them. Once peeled, the Salsify is ready to be transformed. And how did they transform it, you ask? Well, in a variety of ways. One common method was to boil it. Plain boiled Salsify might not sound like the most exciting dish, but remember, this was a time when spices were expensive and often reserved for the upper classes. So, a simple boiled root was often considered a perfectly acceptable meal. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of plain yogurt. Healthy, but not exactly setting the world on fire. You might also find Salsify roasted. Imagine it nestled alongside a haunch of venison, slowly caramelizing in the heat of a roaring fireplace. That sounds a bit better, doesn't it? Roasting would have brought out the Salsify's slightly sweet flavor, a welcome contrast to the often savory nature of medieval cuisine. But the medievals weren't just boiling and roasting their Salsify. They were also getting creative. Salsify could be added to stews, providing a hearty and nutritious element to these one-pot wonders. It could be pureed into soups, lending a creamy texture and subtle flavor. And sometimes, just sometimes, it might even be used in pies. Yes, Salsify pie. A concept that might make your modern taste buds shudder, but back then, it was a perfectly reasonable thing to eat. Think of it as a savory pie, filled with a mixture of Salsify, herbs, and perhaps a bit of meat if you were lucky. It wouldn't be a sweet dessert pie, of course. Sugar was a luxury item. The sweetness would come from the Salsify itself, which is often described as having a flavor reminiscent of oysters when cooked. Hence one of Salsify's many common names, the oyster plant. Let's talk recipes, shall we? You're probably thinking, okay, great, they ate Salsify. But how exactly? Well, unfortunately, finding precise medieval recipes for Salsify is a bit like searching for a specific grain of sand on a beach. Medieval cookbooks, when they existed, were often vague and assumed a certain level of culinary knowledge. They might tell you to take Salsify and cook it well, but leave out crucial details like, how long to cook it for, or what spices to add. But, we can piece together some ideas based on general medieval cooking practices. For example, a simple Salsify stew might involve simmering the root with onions, leeks, and whatever other vegetables were available. You might add some herbs like parsley or thyme, and perhaps a bit of salt if you could afford it. If you were feeling particularly fancy, you could even throw in a piece of meat, like a chunk of mutton or pork. Imagine the delightful aroma wafting through your medieval kitchen. Or maybe don't. Medieval kitchens probably weren't all that delightful smelling, actually. They probably reeked of open fires and, well, let's not dwell on that. Or consider a Salsify puree. To make this, you'd boil the Salsify until tender, then mash it with a bit of butter or cream. Again, herbs and spices would be added to taste. This puree could be served as a side dish, or even used as a base for a more elaborate sauce. Picture yourself, a medieval lord or lady, daintily scooping up a spoonful of Salsify puree with a silver spoon. Feeling fancy yet? Another popular method was to combine the oyster plant with a rich stock, and other root vegetables and create a potage. A potage, also known as pottage, is a thick soup or stew made by boiling various ingredients in water, often in a large pot for an extended period. But here's a little secret, medieval cooks weren't always using Salsify because they loved it. Sometimes, they were using it because they had to. Food shortages were a fact of life in the Middle Ages. And Salsify, being a relatively hardy and easy-to-grow root vegetable, was often a reliable source of sustenance when other crops failed. So, while it might not have been the star of every meal, it was a valuable player in the medieval diet. Some might even say it's the unsung hero of many a lean winter. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some medieval texts suggest that Salsify was believed to have medicinal properties. It was thought to be good for digestion, and even for, stimulating certain, romantic inclinations. Take that with a grain of salt, of course. Medieval medicine wasn't exactly known for its accuracy. But it's interesting to think that our humble salsify might have been seen as something of an aphrodisiac. Maybe that's why it was so popular at those medieval feasts. Or maybe not. Probably not. Now, the big question, was salsify a food of the rich, or the poor? The answer, as is often the case with historical questions, is, it depends. While salsify wasn't a peasant staple like barley or oats, it wasn't exactly reserved for royalty either. It occupied a sort of middle ground, accessible to a wide range of people. Wealthier peasants might have grown it in their gardens. Town dwellers could purchase it at the market. And of course, it would have been a regular feature on the tables of the nobility. It also depends where you are. Medieval Europe wasn't a single, homogeneous entity. Different regions had different culinary traditions and different access to various foods. Salsify might have been more popular in some areas than others. And even within a single region, there would have been variations in how it was prepared and consumed. So, there you have it, a brief glimpse into the world of salsify in medieval cuisine. It might not be the most glamorous or exciting topic, but it's a fascinating reminder of how food has shaped human history. And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to try some salsify yourself. Just remember to wear gloves when you peel it. You wouldn't want to end up with medieval-style stained hands. Or maybe you would. A conversation starter, perhaps. Oh, these? They're for my experimental medieval cooking project. And one last thing. Salsify also appears in the works of Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century Benedictine abbess, philosopher, mystic, visionary, and composer. She was quite the polymath. She even wrote about the healing properties of salsify. Another fringe tidbit, she also claimed to experience divine visions from a young age. Take it with a grain of salt, but it certainly adds a bit of mystique to our humble root vegetable. And that brings us to the end of our little salsify journey. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you'll even find yourself craving some salsify now. No. Okay, fair enough. Right, settle in, settle in. Let's talk about a vegetable that once graced the tables of kings and now, well, now you probably haven't even heard of it. We're diving deep, really deep, like digging in the garden deep, into the strange and sorrowful tale of salsify. Salsify. Say it with me. Salsify. Feels a bit like you're clearing your throat, doesn't it? Which, incidentally, is probably more action than most people have seen it get in the last century. So, imagine this, you're a medieval noble, all decked out in velvet and questionable hygiene, ready to tuck into a feast. Amongst the roast swan and jellied eels, you spy a dish of salsify. Back then, this humble root vegetable was a hot ticket. People loved it. They cultivated it. They wrote poems about it. Okay, maybe not poems, but they definitely, mentioned it in poems. It was a big deal. Salsify had arrived. Now, picture yourself, fast forward a few centuries. You're in a bustling Victorian marketplace. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and questionable sausages. There, nestled amongst the potatoes and parsnips, you see, salsify. Still holding its own. It's a dependable, if somewhat overlooked, staple. Queen Victoria herself likely nibbled on it. Maybe she even said, "Oh, that salsify is rather pleasant." Though, knowing her, she probably said something far more imposing about the proper disposal of orange peel. You know, being a queen and all. But still, it's there. A survivor. But fast forward again, this time to your local supermarket today. You're wandering the produce section, overwhelmed by exotic fruits you can't pronounce and suspiciously perfect avocados. Do you see salsify? I'm betting not. Unless you're actively hunting for it, and frankly, who is these days? It's gone. Vanished. Like a culinary Bigfoot. What happened? Where did it all go wrong? Well, grab your metaphorical trowel, because we're about to dig into the reasons why Salsify, once a star, faded into obscurity. One of the primary culprits, and this is a real humdinger, is its appearance. Let's be honest, Salsify isn't exactly winning any beauty contests. It's long, thin, brown, and, well, it looks a bit like a dirty parsnip that's had a particularly rough day. It lacks that vibrant, eye-catching appeal that draws shoppers in. It's not the kind of vegetable you Instagram. Unless you're going for a very specific, my life is a black and white film noir aesthetic. And then there's the name. Salsify. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? It sounds like a medical condition or something you'd find growing in a swamp. Marketing is everything, people. Imagine if they'd called it something catchy, like Sweet Meadow Root or The Emperor's Delight. Who knows, maybe it would still be gracing Michelin-starred menus. Historians still argue whether better branding could have saved the Salsify. I mean, it certainly couldn't have hurt. But the real nail in the coffin, or should I say, the root in the ground, is its taste. Ah, the taste. This is where things get interesting. Salsify is often described as tasting like oysters. Yes, you heard me right. Oysters. A root vegetable that tastes like a seafood delicacy. It's either genius or completely bonkers. There is very little middle ground. Now, while some people might be intrigued by this culinary anomaly, the majority are probably thinking, wait, why would I eat a root vegetable that tastes like oysters when I could just eat oysters? It's a fair point. Why settle for a vegetable that tastes of something else, when the something else is readily available, fresh, and, well, oyster why? It's like the veggie burger dilemma, why bother with a pale imitation when you can have the real deal? This unique flavor profile, while initially appealing, ultimately became its downfall. Tastes change, trends shift, and the novelty of oyster-flavored dirt eventually wore off. The rise of global trade and the availability of a wider variety of vegetables further marginalized Salsify. Why bother wrestling with a quirky root when you can have sweet potatoes from Peru or bok choy from China? The world became smaller, and Salsify became smaller still. And let's not forget the prep work. Salsify isn't exactly the easiest vegetable to prepare. It's got a sticky, milky sap that oozes out when you peel it, and it discolors quickly. You need to soak it in lemon water to prevent it from turning an unappetizing shade of gray. It's a whole thing. In our modern world of instant gratification and pre-packaged everything, who has time for that kind of faff? We want our vegetables peeled, chopped, and ready to roast, not requiring a full hazmat suit and a degree in culinary chemistry. The irony is, if you do put in the effort, Salsify can be quite delicious. Roasted, it has a subtle sweetness and a slightly nutty flavor, with that faint hint of the sea that sets it apart. It can be added to soups, stews, or even mashed like potatoes. But that initial hurdle, the appearance, the name, the oyster association, the sticky sap, is just too much for most people to overcome. Think of it like this, Salsify is the introverted artist of the vegetable world. It's got hidden depths, a unique perspective, and a lot of potential. But it's not exactly shouting from the rooftops. It's sitting quietly in the corner, hoping someone will notice its subtle brilliance. And in a world that's all about instant fame and flashy presentations, it's easy to get overlooked. Historically, another factor played a role. The development of faster and more efficient farming practices favored crops that were easier to grow and yielded larger harvests. Salsify, with its relatively low yield and finicky nature, simply couldn't compete. It was the blockbuster video of the vegetable aisle, a once popular choice that was ultimately outpaced by newer, more convenient options. And here's a quirky tidbit for you, Salsify is also known as vegetable oyster or oyster plant. This moniker dates back to the 17th century, when people first noticed its unusual flavor. Some even believed that it could be used as a substitute for oysters during Lent, when meat consumption was prohibited. Imagine trying to convince your medieval friends that roasted Salsify was just as good as a platter of fresh oysters. Good luck with that. The decline of Salsify also reflects a broader shift in our relationship with food. We've become increasingly disconnected from the origins of our meals. We prioritize convenience and aesthetics over flavor and tradition. We want our food to be quick, easy, and Instagrammable. Salsify, with its earthy charm and old-fashioned appeal, simply doesn't fit the bill. However, all is not lost. There are whispers of a Salsify revival. Some adventurous chefs are rediscovering its unique flavor and incorporating it into their dishes. Small-scale farmers are cultivating it, preserving it for future generations. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll stumble upon a dish of perfectly roasted Salsify at a trendy restaurant and think, wow, this is actually pretty good. Perhaps we need to reframe our thinking about Salsify. Instead of seeing it as a vegetable that tastes like oysters, we should appreciate it for what it is, a unique and intriguing root with its own distinct flavor profile. It's a reminder that not all vegetables have to be bright, shiny, and predictable. Sometimes, the most interesting flavors are found in the most unexpected places. So, the next time you're feeling adventurous, seek out some Salsify. Give it a try. You might just be surprised. And even if you don't fall in love with its oyster-y flavor, you can at least say you've tasted a piece of culinary history. Plus, imagine the smug satisfaction you'll feel when you can casually drop the word Salsify into conversation. Oh, you haven't tried Salsify? You simply must. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to spark the next Salsify revolution. It could happen. Stranger things have, sprouted from the soil. Although, in this new era of food, who decides what grows and what fades is a question of heated debate. You trudge through the damp earth, the scent of overturned soil clinging to your boots like a lovesick puppy. Your hands, now smeared with a satisfying layer of grime, fumble for another buried treasure. Today, you're not hunting for gold, or even a particularly impressive earthworm. No, today you seek potatoes. Humble, lumpy, and undeniably beige potatoes. But pause for a moment, friend. Before you dismiss this seemingly mundane tuber, consider its revolutionary past. Picture Europe centuries ago. You're in a world where the staples aren't exactly thrilling. Grains reign supreme, but they're susceptible to blight. There are root vegetables, yes, but nothing quite as versatile as the potato. In fact, before the potato really took hold, you might have been gnawing on something far less appealing, Salsify. Salsify. Say it out loud. Salsify. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue like pomme de terre, does it? Now, Salsify isn't inherently bad. It's a root vegetable with a subtle oyster-like flavor. Subtlety, though, isn't exactly what you crave when you're staring down a long, bleak winter with little else to eat. Plus, let's be honest, peeling Salsify is a bit of a nightmare. It's all stringy and aggressively beige. The potato, on the other hand, arrived with a promise of abundance. Originating in the Andes Mountains of South America, where the Inca thrived on a staggering variety of cultivated potatoes, it slowly made its way across the Atlantic, initially met with suspicion and downright hostility. Imagine a farmer, used to diligently tilling his wheat fields, presented with this knobbly, alien thing. Eat this? He probably scoffed. It looks like something a badger coughed up. And, initially, they had a point. Early introductions of the potato were often mishandled. People tried to eat the leaves, which, tragically, are poisonous. This, unsurprisingly, didn't exactly inspire confidence. Plus, there was the whole nightshade family association. Nightshade plants, you see, have a reputation for being, well, let's just say they're not all destined for the dinner table. Some, like deadly nightshade, are best admired from a safe distance. So, the potato, guilty by association, faced an uphill battle for acceptance. It's like trying to convince your parents that your new friend, who happens to be covered in tattoos and piercings, is actually a very nice person. But then, something remarkable happened. The potato persevered. Slowly, tentatively, people started to figure out how to cultivate it properly, how to cook it in ways that were palatable, and non-lethal, and, most importantly, how incredibly productive it was. You see, unlike grains, which require significant labor and fertile land, the potato could thrive in less than ideal conditions. It was a resilient little survivor. And, critically, it offered a significantly higher yield per acre. This meant more food for more people, especially during times of famine. Now, here's a mainstream historical fact for you: the potato played a critical role in the population boom of Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries. Think about that. It's kind of mind-boggling to consider that a single vegetable could have such a profound impact on human history. It's like a humble, earthy butterfly flapping its wings and causing a population hurricane. And while the potato was busy changing the demographics of Europe, poor old Salsify was quietly fading into obscurity. It never quite achieved the same level of popularity, the same widespread adoption. It remained a niche crop, appreciated by gourmands and home gardeners, but never truly challenging the potato's reign. It's a little sad, really. Like the talented understudy who never gets to play the lead role. But why did the potato win out? Historians still argue whether it was solely due to its higher yields, or if other factors were at play, such as taste preference, ease of preparation, or even cultural biases. Some historians suggest that the potato's blandness, ironically, was an advantage. It could be easily incorporated into a wide variety of dishes, acting as a blank canvas for different flavors. Salsify, with its distinctive oyster-like taste, was less versatile. You couldn't exactly make salsify fries, could you? Although, now that I think about it, salsify chips might be interesting. And here's a quirky little tidbit for you: in some parts of Europe, the potato was initially believed to have aphrodisiac properties. Can you imagine? Dinner parties must have been very interesting. I bet sales of potatoes skyrocketed. Move over, oysters, there's a new root vegetable in town promising, ahem, vitality. Of course, the potato's success story isn't without its dark chapters. The Irish potato famine of the mid-19th century, caused by a devastating potato blight, resulted in widespread starvation and emigration. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of relying too heavily on a single crop, of putting all your proverbial eggs, or, in this case, potatoes, in one basket. It was a tragedy of immense proportions, and it forever altered the landscape of Ireland. But even in the face of such devastation, the potato endured. It was replanted, recultivated, and eventually, new, blight-resistant varieties were developed. It's a testament to the potato's resilience, and to humanity's unwavering determination to overcome adversity. It's like a vegetable phoenix, rising from the ashes, more determined than ever to feed the world. So, there you have it. The potato's rise to power, and the salsify's quiet retreat. It's a story of innovation, adaptation, and a little bit of culinary Darwinism. It's also a reminder that even the most seemingly insignificant things can have a profound impact on history. Now, before you start dreaming of mashed potatoes, I want to share one more fringe tidbit. There's a theory, not widely accepted but still fascinating, that the introduction of the potato into Europe actually changed European culture. Some argue that the potato's high caloric content and ease of cultivation allowed for a more stable food supply, which in turn led to increased population density, urbanization, and even the rise of industrial capitalism. It's a bit of a stretch, perhaps, but it's certainly food for thought, pun intended. And speaking of food, let's get back to those potatoes you're digging up. I can almost smell them baking in the oven, slathered in butter and sprinkled with sea salt. Butter. Now, I know the narrative has been a little heavy on the historical stuff, but you know what? I think we all deserve a little potato-related levity. So, here's a joke: what do you call a lazy kangaroo? Pouch potato. Okay, I know it's terrible, but I had to get it out of my system. It's like a mental potato burp. As you continue your potato harvest, think about the long and winding road this humble tuber has traveled. From the high Andes to the tables of Europe, it has nourished and sustained countless generations. And while Salsify may have lost the battle for culinary supremacy, it still holds a place in the hearts and stomachs of those who appreciate its unique flavor. After all, variety is the spice of life, even when it comes to root vegetables. And now, before I send you off to enjoy your well-earned potato feast, here's one more absolutely terrible joke. What do you call a potato that's always complaining? A complainer-tater. Seriously, I'm so sorry. I promise, no more potato jokes. Unless, wait, one more. What's a potato's favorite type of music? Heavy metal. Okay, now I'm done. It's been a long day of digging, narrating, and inflicting terrible potato puns upon you. I'm practically turning into a couch potato myself. I think I need a nap. You can keep digging, though. And when you finally sink your teeth into a perfectly roasted potato, remember its story. Remember the Salsify, too. And remember that even the humblest of vegetables can have a profound impact on the world. Maybe, just maybe, you will have a potato-related dream. If you do, let me know. I'm always up for a good potato story. Or even one more potato joke. No, I'm kidding. Maybe. Okay, settle in, friends. Let's talk Salsify. Yes, Salsify. The underdog of the root vegetable world. The oyster plant. The thing your great-aunt Mildred used to serve at Thanksgiving and everyone politely choked down while dreaming of pumpkin pie. But times, as they say, are changing. You see, you're starting to see Salsify creep back onto menus, in farmers' markets, even, dare I say, Instagram posts. Chefs are rediscovering it. Foodies are experimenting with it. It's like Salsify went into witness protection and re-emerged with a new name and a slightly better publicist. So, you're probably wondering, what's the big deal? Well, imagine you're wandering through a slightly overgrown garden. The air is cool, a little damp. You trudge through the slightly muddy earth, maybe your boots are getting a little stuck, wouldn't that be annoying? And you spot it, a slender, unassuming plant with grassy leaves. You pull it up, and there it is, a long, creamy white root, maybe a little knobbly, covered in dirt. That, my friend, is Salsify. Now, before you recoil in horror and imagine Aunt Mildred's gray, watery concoction, let me tell you, properly prepared, Salsify is actually quite delicious. Its flavor is often described as resembling oysters, which is where it gets its nickname. Some people detect hints of artichoke or even asparagus. It's subtle, earthy, and a little bit sweet. It's a blank canvas for culinary creativity. You peel it, you slice it, you roast it, you fry it, you puree it, the possibilities are pretty vast. Think of it as the tofu of the root vegetable world. Okay, maybe that's not the best analogy. But you get the idea. And where did this renaissance come from? Well, as you know, food trends are cyclical. What was once old becomes new again. Nostalgia plays a big role. Remember the avocado toast craze? Or the sudden resurgence of kale? It's all part of the culinary circle of life. And now, it seems, Salsify's time has come again. But its story is a long and fascinating one, and believe it or not, we're not the first to think about putting it on our plates. Back in the day, specifically the 16th century, Salsify was a common ingredient in European kitchens. It was valued for its flavor and its nutritional properties. It's thought to have originated in the Mediterranean region, but quickly spread throughout Europe. It was a staple in many gardens, both humble and grand. Even royalty enjoyed Salsify, although probably with considerably more butter than your average peasant. Now, here's a fun fact for you, Salsify was once believed to have medicinal properties. People used it to treat everything from snake bites to, well, pretty much anything, really. It was the miracle cure of its day, or at least, that's what some people claimed. Imagine slathering yourself in Salsify paste to ward off evil spirits. I bet you'd smell amazing. Historians still argue whether Salsify's medicinal reputation was based on actual health benefits or simply wishful thinking. Probably a bit of both, if we're being honest. But as time went on, Salsify gradually fell out of favor. Other vegetables, like potatoes and carrots, became more popular. Salsify became relegated to the culinary sidelines, a forgotten relic of the past. It hung around in gardens and seed catalogs, but it was no longer a star player on the dinner table. It was the culinary equivalent of that one band that had a hit song in the 80s and then disappeared. You know, they still exist, they still play gigs, but nobody really remembers their name. But now, thanks to adventurous chefs and curious foodies, Salsify is making a comeback. It's being rediscovered and reinterpreted in exciting new ways. It's being paired with unexpected flavors and showcased in innovative dishes. You might find it roasted with brown butter and sage, or pureed into a creamy soup, or even pickled and served as a garnish. And the interest extends beyond the professional kitchen. Home cooks are also starting to experiment with Salsify, seeking out its unique flavor and incorporating it into their own recipes. You can find Salsify seeds online, at specialty nurseries, and even at some larger garden centers. You can grow your own Salsify, right in your own backyard. Imagine the satisfaction of harvesting your own Salsify, knowing that you're participating in this culinary renaissance. You can invite Aunt Mildred over and show her how it's really done. You can impress your friends with your knowledge of obscure root vegetables. You can finally be that person who brings the interesting dish to the potluck. Speaking of interesting, here's a quirky tidbit for you. There are actually two main types of Salsify, black Salsify and white Salsify. White Salsify, which we've been discussing, has a creamy white root and a milder flavor. Black Salsify, on the other hand, has a dark, almost black skin and a more assertive, slightly bitter flavor. It's sometimes called viper's grass, which sounds way more exciting than oyster plant, doesn't it? You can imagine serving that up at your Halloween dinner party. Black Salsify is more common in Europe, while white Salsify is more common in North America. But both types are worth trying, if you can find them. They each have their own unique flavor profile and culinary applications. It's like the root vegetable equivalent of a twin sibling scenario. One is a quiet academic and one is a rebellious rock star. Historians still argue about the exact reasons for Salsify's decline in popularity. Some blame the rise of industrial agriculture, which favored more easily mass-produced crops like potatoes. Others point to changing culinary tastes, with people gravitating towards sweeter and more brightly colored vegetables. Still others suggest that Salsify's somewhat challenging preparation process contributed to its downfall. It can be a bit fiddly to peel and cook, and if you don't do it right, it can be tough and bitter. But whatever the reasons, the fact remains that Salsify is now experiencing a well-deserved resurgence. It's a testament to the power of curiosity, the importance of preserving culinary traditions, and the enduring appeal of good food. You could even say it is a symbol of the whole farm-to-table movement. You know, the whole idea of eating local, seasonal, sustainable ingredients. Salsify fits right into that ethos. It's a vegetable that requires a bit of effort to grow and prepare, but the rewards are well worth it. It's a connection to the past, a celebration of the present, and a glimpse into the future of food. So, the next time you're at the farmer's market, or browsing through a seed catalog, keep an eye out for Salsify. Give it a try. Experiment with it in your kitchen. You might just discover your new favorite vegetable. And who knows? Maybe you'll even start a Salsify trend of your own. You can be the Salsify influencer of your neighborhood. Imagine the power. And hey, if nothing else, you'll have a good story to tell Aunt Mildred at Thanksgiving. That's worth something, right? Just promise me you'll skip the gray, watery version. Okay. Okay. Now, good night. Alright, welcome back to my cozy kitchen, where today we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Salsify. Yes, Salsify. I know, the name sounds like something Dr. Seuss made up, right? But trust me, This root vegetable is worth getting to know. So, grab a mug of something warm, maybe chamomile. Don't judge my choices, and let's get started. First things first, what is salsify? Well, picture a long, slender root, kind of like a parsnip but with a slightly darker skin. When cooked, it's often described as tasting like oysters. Yep, you heard that right. Oysters. From a root vegetable. Hence, one of its nicknames, the oyster plant. Don't get too excited though. This is a very subtle, very vague, oyster-esque flavor, not a briny slap in the face from the sea. More like the memory of an oyster you once had on a beach vacation. Remember those? You trudge into the garden, the soil clinging stubbornly to your boots. It's November, and the air is crisp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves. You begin to gently loosen the earth around the base of the plant, coaxing the salsify roots from their earthy home. They're surprisingly resilient, clinging tight to the soil, a testament to their stubbornness and willingness to thrive in less than ideal circumstances. See, you can grow them. Historically, salsify has a surprisingly long and storied past. It was cultivated in Europe as far back as the 16th century, primarily as a medicinal plant. People believed it had all sorts of healing properties, from curing snake bites, I'm dubious, to acting as a general tonic. Imagine your doctor prescribing salsify for, well, everything. Feeling a bit under the weather? Take 2 salsifys and call me in the morning. Now, here's a fun little tidbit. In some parts of Europe, salsify was once used as a coffee substitute during periods of scarcity. They would roast the roots, grind them up, and brew them into a beverage that, while probably not tasting anything like actual coffee, provided a much-needed caffeine-free pick-me-up. You know, desperate times, desperate measures, and all that. Historians still argue whether the medicinal properties attributed to salsify were real or simply a placebo effect. But even if it was just a placebo, it clearly worked for some people. I mean, who are we to judge the healing power of belief? Alright, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of cooking with this weird and wonderful root. Now, I'm not going to lie, salsify can be a bit of a pain to prepare. The skin is thin but stubborn, and it tends to oxidize quickly, turning brown and unappetizing. So, have a bowl of water with a splash of lemon juice or vinegar ready to go. As soon as you peel a salsify root, dunk it straight into the water. This will keep it looking fresh and vibrant. As you peel, feel the smooth, cool surface of the root beneath your fingers. Notice the subtle earthy aroma that rises as you break through the skin. It's a scent that speaks of the earth, of hidden depths and unexpected flavors. The texture is firm, almost crisp, promising a satisfying bite when cooked. Now, there are a million ways to cook salsify, but today we're going to focus on a few modern recipes that really highlight its unique flavor profile. First up, let's try a salsify and apple slaw. You julienne the salsify into thin, matchstick-like pieces, the knife gliding smoothly through the firm flesh. The pale interior reveals itself, a canvas for the flavors to come. You add crisp, tart apple slices, their sweetness complementing the earthiness of the salsify. A light vinaigrette, made with Dijon mustard, apple cider vinegar, and a touch of honey, brings everything together. It's a refreshing, vibrant salad that's perfect as a side dish or even as a light lunch. The sweetness of the apple balances the subtle oyster-like flavor of the salsify, creating a harmonious blend of tastes and textures. I reckon it's a bit of a palate cleanser, really. Next, let's move on to something a little more substantial, salsify fritters with a lemon dill aioli. You grate the salsify coarsely, its texture transforming from firm to fluffy. You mix it with flour, eggs, and a pinch of salt, creating a batter that's both light and substantial. A touch of grated Parmesan cheese adds a savory depth, while chopped fresh dill brings a burst of herbaceousness. In a hot pan, you sizzle spoonfuls of the batter, watching as they turn golden brown and crispy around the edges. The aroma is intoxicating, a blend of earthy salsify, savory cheese, and fresh dill. You drain the fritters on paper towels, allowing the excess oil to dissipate, before serving them with a generous dollop of lemon dill aioli. The aioli, made with mayonnaise, lemon juice, garlic, and more fresh dill, is the perfect accompaniment to the fritters. Its creamy texture and bright, zesty flavor cut through the richness of the fritters, creating a balanced and satisfying dish. I'm salivating just thinking about it. These are dangerously addictive. And now, for something a bit fancier, let's try a salsify and brown butter puree. This is where the oyster-like flavor of salsify really shines. You peel and chop the salsify into even-sized pieces. You melt butter in a pan, watching carefully as it transforms from golden yellow to a rich, nutty brown. The aroma is intoxicating, a blend of caramel and toasted nuts that fills the kitchen with warmth. You add the salsify to the pan, tossing it in the brown butter until it's coated evenly. You add a splash of vegetable broth and let it simmer until the salsify is tender. Then, you transfer the mixture to a blender and puree it until it's smooth and velvety. A touch of heavy cream adds richness and a pinch of salt brings out the flavors. The puree is decadent and luxurious, a perfect accompaniment to grilled fish or roasted chicken. The brown butter adds a depth of flavor that complements the subtle oyster-like flavor of the salsify, creating a truly memorable dish. I may or may not have eaten an entire bowl of this by myself once. Don't judge. Now, here's a quirky fact for you: in some folklore, salsify is said to have magical properties. It's believed to bring good luck and protect against evil spirits. I don't know about that, but I do know that it tastes pretty darn good. Maybe that's the magic. Also, did you know that there are two main types of salsify? There's the common salsify, also known as white salsify, and then there's black salsify, also known as scorzonera. Black salsify has a darker skin and a slightly more intense flavor. It's also a pain to peel. Both are delicious, but they do have slightly different textures and flavor profiles. So, experiment and see which one you prefer. Or, if you're really adventurous, try both. Historians still argue about the origin of the name salsify. Some believe it comes from the Italian word sassafrica, which means stone breaker, referring to the plant's ability to grow in rocky soil. Others believe it comes from the French word salsifis, which is simply a derivation of the Italian word. The mystery continues. Alright, before we wrap up, let me share one more tip for working with salsify. If you find that your salsify is a little tough, try blanching it before cooking it. Simply boil it in salted water for a few minutes, then plunge it into ice water to stop the cooking process. This will help to soften the root and make it more tender. You know, sometimes I wonder why salsify isn't more popular. It's a unique and versatile vegetable with a fascinating history and a delicious flavor. Maybe it's the name. Maybe it's the slightly challenging preparation. Or maybe it's just that people are afraid to try something new. But honestly, don't be scared. Give salsify a chance. You might just be surprised at how much you enjoy it. Just maybe. And that's about all the salsify I can handle for one day, folks. As you can see, this root vegetable is far from ordinary. It's a culinary adventure waiting to happen. So, go out there, find some salsify, and get cooking. Who knows, you might just discover your new favorite ingredient. Just make sure you have some lemon water on hand. I'm fading, folks. Alright, settle in, friends. Let's talk roots. Earthy, starchy, grounding, roots. Specifically, we're diving deep, real deep, into the nutritional showdown between the humble potato and its less famous cousin, the salsify. Now, I know what you're thinking: salsify. Sounds like something you'd find in a potions class. And you're not entirely wrong. But trust me, this pale, slender root has a story to tell, and a surprising amount of nutritional muscle to flex. So, imagine you're standing in your garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. You're considering what to pull up for dinner. On one side, you've got your reliable potato patch, bursting with tubers in various shades of brown and red. On the other, a more demure row of Salsify, its grassy top swaying gently in the breeze. Which one do you choose? Well, tonight, we're choosing both, but with a very critical eye. Let's start with the potato, because let's face it, it's the star. You grab a spade and carefully unearth a few beauties. Feel the cool earth clinging to their skins. The weight in your hand. It's a comforting, familiar sensation. Potatoes are practically synonymous with comfort food, aren't they? Mashed potatoes, French fries, potato salad, the possibilities are endless. They're a blank canvas, ready to absorb whatever flavors you throw at them. It's no wonder they are a global staple. Did you know that the potato, originally cultivated in the Andes Mountains of South America, didn't become a widespread crop in Europe until the 18th century? Before that, it was largely considered a curiosity, even poisonous by some. Imagine, poisonous potatoes. Now that's a scary movie premise. But, through clever cultivation and aggressive marketing by figures like Antoine-Augustin Parmentier in France, who hosted potato-themed dinners for royalty, the potato slowly but surely won over the masses. He even guarded his potato fields during the day to make people think they were valuable, then left them unguarded at night so the public would steal them and start growing potatoes themselves. Genius, right? Talk about playing the long game. And speaking of long games, some fringe theorists believe that the potato's widespread adoption was less about its nutritional value and more about its ability to be easily taxed. Think about it, a single, easily identifiable crop that can be stored and transported, the perfect target for government levies. Tin-foil hats, anyone? Nutritionally, the potato is a decent source of vitamin C, potassium, and certain B vitamins. It also provides a good dose of fiber, especially if you eat the skin. But it's the starch content that really defines the potato. That's what gives it that satisfying, filling quality. However, that starch can also be a double-edged sword, leading to blood sugar spikes if you're not careful. Everything in moderation, right? Even potatoes. Now, let's turn our attention to the underdog, the Salsify. You carefully loosen the soil around its base, and with a gentle tug, you pull it free. It's long and slender, with a creamy white flesh that darkens quickly once exposed to air. It smells, well, faintly oyster-like, which is why it's sometimes called the oyster plant. Hold on, oyster plant? Who came up with that? Salsify, unlike the potato, has a much less dramatic history. It's native to Europe and parts of Asia, and it's been cultivated as a food crop since ancient times. But it never achieved the same level of popularity as the potato. It's always been more of a niche vegetable, a culinary curiosity. Interestingly, there are two main types of Salsify, black Salsify and white Salsify. Black Salsify has a darker skin and a slightly more intense flavor, while white Salsify is milder and more delicately flavored. We're talking about white Salsify tonight, just to keep things simple. And here's a quirky tidbit: Salsify was once believed to have medicinal properties, used to treat everything from snake bites to melancholy. Now, I'm not suggesting you ditch your antidepressants for a plate of roasted Salsify, but it's interesting to see how our perception of food and medicine has evolved over time, isn't it? Nutritionally, Salsify holds its own against the potato, and in some ways, it even surpasses it. It's lower in calories and carbohydrates, making it a potentially better choice for those watching their weight or blood sugar levels. It's also a good source of fiber, potassium, and vitamin C. But what really sets Salsify apart is its high inulin content. Inulin is a type of prebiotic fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. A happy gut equals a happy you, right? Historians still argue whether Salsify's lack of mainstream appeal is due to its more complex flavor profile, its less versatile texture, or simply a lack of marketing. It's a fascinating case study in how some foods become global sensations while others remain relegated to the sidelines. Maybe it just needs its own Antoine-Augustin Parmentier. Someone to throw a fancy Salsify-themed dinner for a few influencers. I volunteer. So, back to our garden. You've got your potatoes, you've got your salsify. What now? Well, let's consider the ways you might prepare them. Potatoes, as we discussed, are incredibly versatile. You can boil them, bake them, fry them, mash them, roast them, the list goes on and on. Each method brings out a different aspect of their flavor and texture. Salsify, on the other hand, requires a bit more finesse. The key is to peel it quickly and plunge it into acidulated water with a little lemon juice or vinegar, to prevent it from discoloring. Then, you can boil it, steam it, roast it, or even puree it. It has a slightly sweet, slightly earthy flavor that pairs well with butter, cream, and herbs. One classic preparation is salsify fritters. You boil the salsify until tender, mash it with some flour, egg, and seasonings, and then fry it until golden brown. They're crispy on the outside, creamy on the inside, and utterly delicious. Seriously, if you've never tried salsify fritters, you're missing out. It's my little secret. And here's a culinary tip: try roasting salsify with potatoes. The sweetness of the salsify complements the earthiness of the potatoes beautifully, creating a dish that's both comforting and complex. Plus, it's a great way to introduce your family and friends to this often overlooked vegetable. They'll think you're some kind of culinary genius. You're welcome. Now, let's talk about the sustainability aspect. Potatoes are relatively easy to grow, and they can produce a large yield in a small space. They're also relatively resistant to pests and diseases. However, potato farming can be hard on the soil, requiring regular crop rotation and fertilization. Salsify, on the other hand, is a bit more challenging to cultivate. It requires well-drained soil and a long growing season. It's also more susceptible to certain pests and diseases. However, salsify is a perennial plant, meaning that it can live for several years, reducing the need for replanting. Some argue that focusing on more diverse and resilient crops like salsify could be a key to building a more sustainable food system. By reducing our reliance on a handful of staple crops, we can make our food supply more resistant to climate change, pests, and diseases. Plus, it's just more interesting to eat a variety of foods, right? But, let's be honest. You're probably going to reach for the potatoes more often than the salsify, and that's okay. Potatoes are familiar, comforting, and readily available. They're a reliable source of energy and nutrients, and they can be transformed into countless delicious dishes. However, I encourage you to give salsify a try. Seek it out at your local farmer's market or specialty grocery store. Experiment with different preparations. Discover its unique flavor and texture. You might just be surprised at how much you like it. And remember, food is more than just fuel. It's a connection to our past, a celebration of our present, and a promise for our future. So, whether you're enjoying a simple baked potato or a plate of roasted salsify, take a moment to appreciate the journey that food has taken to reach your plate. Think about the farmers who grew it, the cooks who prepared it, and the traditions that have shaped it. Ultimately, the choice between salsify and potatoes comes down to personal preference, dietary needs, and culinary creativity. There's no clear winner in this nutritional showdown. Both vegetables have their strengths and weaknesses. But by understanding their unique qualities, we can make informed choices about what we eat and how we nourish ourselves. So, next time you're standing in your garden, or at the grocery store, take a moment to appreciate the incredible diversity of the plant kingdom. Explore the lesser-known vegetables, the forgotten fruits, and the underappreciated herbs. You might just discover your new favorite food. And who knows, maybe you'll even become a salsify evangelist, spreading the gospel of the oyster plant to all who will listen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm going to go make some salsify fritters. And maybe a side of mashed potatoes, just for good measure. You deserve a treat. Don't you think? Okay, settle in, friend. Let your shoulders drop, unclench your jaw, we're going on a little journey together. A journey, into the surprisingly fascinating world of salsify. Yes, salsify. I know, you're probably thinking, Salsify. What even is Salsify? And honestly, before today, I might have asked the same thing. But trust me, there's more to this humble root vegetable than meets the eye. And we're not just talking about its slightly oyster-y taste. We're diving deep, metaphorically speaking, of course, we wouldn't want to disturb the Salsify roots, into its environmental impact. Sustainability, baby. It's all the rage these days, and Salsify. Well, it just might be a low-key champion. So, imagine this, you're trudging through a field, the late afternoon sun warm on your face. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and, well, maybe a faint whiff of oysters, if you're close enough to a Salsify patch. You reach down, the soil cool and yielding beneath your fingers, and gently tug. Up comes a long, slender root, covered in dark soil. That, my friend, is Salsify. And as you wipe the dirt away, you're not just holding a root vegetable, you're holding a tiny piece of a potentially more sustainable future. Isn't that lovely? You see, Salsify isn't some newfangled, genetically modified superfood. It's been around for ages. In fact, historical records show it was cultivated in Europe as early as the 16th century. They were eating this root back when Shakespeare was busy penning sonnets and questionable puns. Although, it's unlikely he wrote, "Shall I compare thee to a Salsify? Thou art more lovely and more, root-like." Probably not his best work. Anyway, while the culinary elite were busy feasting on roasted swans, the more practical-minded folks were busy cultivating Salsify, recognizing its value as a reliable and nutritious food source. There were, however, periods where consumption dropped sharply. It's rumored that Queen Victoria once refused to serve Salsify at a state dinner, declaring it utterly plebeian, which basically sentenced the root to decades of dinner party exile. Poor Salsify, forever misunderstood. Now, here's where things get interesting from a sustainability perspective. Salsify is a relatively low-maintenance crop. It doesn't require a ton of fertilizer or pesticides, which is great news for the environment. Less chemicals in the soil means less pollution in our waterways and less harm to beneficial insects like bees. And we all know bees are having a tough time these days. Seriously, without bees, we're basically stuck with, well, not much. Imagine a world without avocados. Terrifying, right? Salsify, in its own quiet way, helps to support biodiversity and maintain a healthy ecosystem. But that's not all. Salsify is also pretty drought tolerant. This means it can thrive in areas where water is scarce, making it a valuable crop in regions facing increasing water stress due to climate change. And who among us isn't facing water concerns these days, huh? I mean, even remembering to water your houseplants is a struggle. So, a plant that doesn't require constant doting is a true blessing. Think of it as the chill friend who's always up for hanging out, but never demanding. Let's talk soil. Salsify has deep roots, which help to improve soil structure and prevent erosion. Those roots act like tiny anchors, holding the soil in place and preventing it from being washed away by rain or wind. Healthy soil is essential for healthy ecosystems. It's the foundation upon which all life depends. Plus, healthy soil sequesters carbon, pulling it out of the atmosphere and storing it in the ground. You might even say it's groundbreaking. I'll see myself out. You might be thinking, okay, Salsify sounds pretty good. But surely there are some drawbacks, right? And you'd be right. Salsify isn't perfect. It can be slow to grow, taking up to 2 years to mature. This can be a challenge for farmers who need to turn a quick profit. And while it's relatively pest-resistant, it can still be susceptible to certain diseases and pests. But overall, the benefits of growing Salsify, particularly from an environmental perspective, outweigh the challenges. Now, here's a fun fact: Salsify is sometimes called vegetable oyster, because its flavor is said to resemble oysters when cooked. I know, it sounds a little bizarre, but it's true. And speaking of bizarre, there's a fringe theory that salsify was actually used by ancient alchemists in their attempts to create the philosopher's stone. I mean, it's a root vegetable, it grows in the ground, it's vaguely phallic, who am I to say it wasn't involved in some weird magical experiments? You know, historians still argue whether alchemy was a genuine scientific pursuit or just a bunch of bored dudes playing with fire, but the allure remains. So, what does all of this mean for the future? Well, I believe that salsify has the potential to play a significant role in creating a more sustainable food system. By promoting the cultivation of crops like salsify, we can reduce our reliance on resource-intensive agriculture and create a more resilient and environmentally friendly food supply. Imagine a future where our fields are filled with diverse crops, each playing a vital role in maintaining a healthy ecosystem. A future where we're not just feeding ourselves, but also nourishing the planet. A future where the humble salsify gets the respect it deserves. I know, it sounds a little idealistic. But honestly, sometimes a little idealism is exactly what we need. We need to be willing to think outside the box, to challenge conventional wisdom, and to embrace new, or rather, old, solutions to the problems we face. So, the next time you're at the farmer's market, keep an eye out for salsify. Give it a try. You might just be surprised by what you discover. Not only is it good to eat, but it's also good for the planet. And who knows, maybe you'll even become a salsify evangelist, spreading the word about this amazing root vegetable to all who will listen. Now, I understand some people may be hesitant to embrace salsify. It's not exactly the most glamorous vegetable. It doesn't have the sex appeal of an avocado or the Instagram worthiness of a rainbow carrot. But that's okay. Salsify is like that quiet, unassuming friend who's always there for you, offering unwavering support and a surprisingly delicious meal. It's the unsung hero of the root vegetable world. And let's be honest, the world is full of trends, isn't it? 1 minute kale is the only thing you should be eating, the next it's spirulina or activated charcoal. And I'm not against healthy eating trends, but if the queen couldn't knock this thing out of the game, what trend will? Salsify is a forever food, because its benefits are so much more than just an Instagrammable salad. So, what's the takeaway here? Salsify is more than just a weird-tasting root vegetable. It's a symbol of resilience, sustainability, and the power of humble beginnings. It's a reminder that even the smallest things can make a big difference. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, dreaming of fields of salsify swaying gently in the breeze, remember that you too can be a champion for sustainability. You too can make a difference, one root vegetable at a time. Now, close your eyes, and imagine the earthy aroma, the slightly sweet, slightly oyster-y taste, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting a more sustainable future. Sleep tight. Alright, settle in, friend. Let your shoulders drop, maybe dim the lights a little. We're going on a little journey, a culinary quest, if you will. And it involves salsify. Yes, that unassuming, earthy root vegetable. You might be thinking, salsify? Really? That's what I'm relaxing to. Trust me. There's more to this humble root than meets the eye, or palate. You find yourself standing in a bustling marketplace, somewhere in the heart of modern Europe. The air is thick with the scent of spices, freshly baked bread, and, well, something a little bit earthy, a little bit oyster-y. That's probably the salsify. You see vendors hawking their wares, their voices blending into a melodic cacophony. You pause at a stall piled high with knobbly, brown roots, each one coated in a thin layer of soil. This is salsify, in its raw, unadulterated glory. You reach out, hesitantly, and pick one up. It feels surprisingly smooth, cool to the touch. Now, you might be wondering how this unassuming root ended up in this vibrant marketplace. Well, its story stretches back centuries. Salsify, scientifically known as Tragopagon porifolius, has been cultivated in Europe since at least the 16th century. It was a common vegetable in kitchen gardens, prized for its mild, slightly sweet flavor. The earliest mention historians confidently point to comes from the work of Italian botanist Pierandrea Mattioli, though some argue less concrete evidence could push it back even earlier. You can picture it, Renaissance cooks, experimenting with new ingredients, discovering the delights of this unusual root. They probably called it something impossibly long and Latin-sounding. You imagine one of those cooks, perhaps a frazzled kitchen maid, tasked with peeling a mountain of salsify for a nobleman's banquet. She's probably grumbling under her breath, wishing she was anywhere else. You can almost hear her sigh as she meticulously scrapes away the tough outer layer, revealing the creamy white flesh beneath. Back then, preparing salsify was a labor of love, a testament to the dedication of cooks who understood the value of simple, wholesome ingredients. And speaking of those simple ingredients, let's jump across the pond to North America. You're standing in a sprawling, modern supermarket. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting a sterile glow on the rows of perfectly arranged produce. You scan the shelves, searching for something, a little less perfect, a little more earthy. And there, tucked away in a corner, you spot them, salsify roots, neatly packaged and labeled. But here's the quirky bit, salsify isn't native to North America. It was brought over by European settlers, likely as a source of food and medicine. It escaped cultivation and naturalized in many areas, becoming a common wildflower. So, you could say salsify has gone rogue, living its best wild life on the other side of the Atlantic. I bet those original settlers never saw that coming, did they? Imagine their surprise if they could see these same weeds fetching a pretty penny in some fancy grocery store. Some folks even consider salsify a bit of a weed, you know. A tenacious little survivor, popping up where it's least expected. Historians still argue whether the deliberate cultivation or the accidental spread contributed more to salsify's presence in North America today. It's a topic that sparks surprisingly heated debates among botanists and food historians. You can picture them, locked in a scholarly duel, armed with seed catalogs and historical treatises, arguing over the origins of a humble root vegetable. It's a surprisingly dramatic affair. Now, let's zoom in on a specific region, France. Ah, la France, close your eyes and imagine yourself sitting at a charming bistro, the scent of freshly baked croissants and strong coffee filling the air. You peruse the menu, and what do you see? Salsify's au gratin. Salsify, baked in a creamy, cheesy sauce. Magnifique. In France, salsify is often treated with a certain reverence. It's not just a root vegetable, it's a culinary ingredient, worthy of the finest sauces and preparations. You might find it braised with butter and herbs, pureed into a velvety soup, or even candied as a sweet treat. The French have a knack for elevating simple ingredients to extraordinary heights, and salsify is no exception. It's a testament to their culinary ingenuity and their appreciation for the nuances of flavor. Now, here's a little secret, salsify is sometimes called vegetable oyster, because its flavor, when cooked, can have a subtle resemblance to oysters. It's a bit of a stretch, perhaps, but there's a certain briny, savory quality to it that evokes the sea. Some say that you have to have a very active imagination to taste the oyster. It's a bit like those Rorschach inkblot tests, you see what you want to see. Perhaps I'm just not sophisticated enough to appreciate it. You're now in a bustling kitchen in a small village in Italy. Nana is in charge. She's a force of nature, her hands gnarled with age but still capable of wielding a knife with impressive precision. She's preparing salsify fritti, lightly battered and fried salsify sticks. The air is filled with the sizzle of oil and the aroma of garlic and herbs. Nana learned this recipe from her grandmother, who learned it from her grandmother before her. It's a tradition passed down through generations, a culinary link to the past. Nana gives you a wink, a knowing smile playing on her lips. She knows that this simple dish is more than just food, it's a connection to family, to heritage, to a way of life. Now, let's hop over to Japan. You find yourself in a serene Zen garden, the air still and peaceful. You sip a cup of green tea, feeling your worries melt away. You might think that salsify wouldn't be at home in such a refined setting, but you'd be wrong. It's not commonly cultivated, but you'll find gobo, burdock root, which shares a similar earthy quality and is revered for its medicinal and culinary properties. It's believed to cleanse the blood, improve digestion, and promote overall well-being. You take a sip of your tea, contemplating the wisdom of the ages. Perhaps Salsify, too, has hidden health benefits waiting to be discovered. Now, let's venture a bit further afield, to the Middle East. You are in a vibrant spice market, the air thick with exotic aromas. You see vendors selling everything from saffron to sumac, cardamom to cumin. You might stumble across Salsify being used in stews, or roasted with lamb. Each culture brings its own unique twist to the Salsify story. And speaking of twists, here's a quirky tidbit: Salsify is sometimes used as a coffee substitute. The roots can be roasted and ground, then brewed like coffee. The resulting beverage is said to have a slightly nutty, earthy flavor. It's not exactly a latte, but it's a resourceful way to get your caffeine fix. You could try it if you really wanted to. But honestly, I think I'd stick to the real thing. Let's not forget the humble garden. You're standing in a sun-drenched garden, surrounded by rows of vegetables and herbs. You spot a patch of Salsify, its slender leaves reaching towards the sky. You carefully dig up a root, brushing away the soil to reveal its pale, creamy flesh. You take it inside, wash it, and prepare it for cooking. Now, for a moment, you think about the future of Salsify. Will it become the next superfood, touted for its health benefits and culinary versatility? Will it remain a niche ingredient, enjoyed by a select few? Or will it fade into obscurity, forgotten by all but the most dedicated food historians? Historians still argue whether current trends towards local and sustainable eating will impact interest in vegetables like Salsify. It's difficult to say, really. It depends on so many factors. But one thing is certain: Salsify has a story to tell, a story that spans centuries and continents. So, the next time you see Salsify, don't dismiss it as just another root vegetable. Remember its journey, its cultural significance, its quirky history. Take a moment to appreciate its simple beauty, its earthy flavor, its unique place in the culinary world. You might even be inspired to try it yourself. Who knows, you might just discover your new favorite vegetable. And if not, well, at least you'll have a good story to tell. Or, maybe just a funny anecdote to share at your next dinner party. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief from all those harried Renaissance cooks and frustrated kitchen maids, now that you appreciate their efforts. Maybe even Nana is giving you a knowing nod, approving your willingness to learn about her treasured ingredient. As we reach the end of our journey, I encourage you to think about the food you eat. Not just as sustenance, but as a reflection of culture, history, and tradition. Every ingredient has a story to tell, a story that connects us to the past and to each other. And who knows, maybe you'll be inspired to write your own culinary chapter, to add your own unique twist to the ongoing story of food. Now, isn't that a thought? Okay, settle in. Get comfy. Maybe grab a warm beverage, chamomile tea or something. Tonight we're diving deep into Salsify. Yeah, I know, maybe not the most exciting topic at first glance, but trust me on this one. We're going to explore the future of this humble root vegetable, and its potential role in shaping what we eat. And, let's be honest, what we eat is kinda important. So, get ready for some serious food for thought, literally. You find yourself standing in let's call it a hyper-local farmer's market. But it's not just your average weekend affair. Think vertical farms bathed in LED grow lights, gleaming hydroponic setups, and, yes, even a section dedicated entirely to Salsify. Different varieties you've never even dreamed of: white Salsify, black Salsify, even some weird, almost alien-looking purple Salsify. It's the year 2042, and Salsify is, dare I say, trendy. You reach out and touch one of the purple ones. It feels firm. But how did we get here? How did this frankly, rather obscure root vegetable ascend to the culinary throne? Well, let's back up a bit. Salsify, for those not in the know, and let's be real, that's probably most of you, is a long, slender root, often with a slightly oyster-like flavor. Hence the nickname, vegetable oyster. It's been around for centuries. It was cultivated in Europe as early as the 16th century. We know this because, well, people wrote about it. Back then, it wasn't some super specialty ingredient. It was just food. Plain, simple, sustenance. Like, Mom, can we have salsify for dinner again, levels of plain. Now, the quirky bit, did you know that salsify was supposedly a favorite of Queen Victoria? Apparently, she was quite partial to it roasted with a bit of butter. This makes you wonder what other bizarre food preferences royals have harbored throughout history. Maybe King Henry VIII had a secret addiction to pickled turnips. The mind boggles. Historians still argue whether Queen Victoria actually liked salsify or was just being polite to her gardeners. It's one of those historical mysteries that will probably never be truly solved. Like, did she really say, "We are not amused"? And did she mean it, you know? Deep stuff. You wander further into this future market and you see a chef, a real chef, the kind with the crisp white coat and the slightly weary expression, carefully selecting some salsify. He nods to you. "Versatile stuff," he says, his voice a low rumble. "You can do almost anything with it." He disappears into a pop-up restaurant, presumably to create some culinary masterpiece involving, you guessed it, salsify. And that's the key, isn't it? Versatility. In a world facing increasing environmental challenges, the ability to adapt and thrive is paramount. Salsify, it turns out, is a bit of a survivor. It's relatively drought-tolerant, can grow in poor soils, and is resistant to some common pests. Now, I'm not saying it's going to single-handedly save the world from climate change, but it could definitely play a role in diversifying our food supply. We're relying on a dangerously small number of crops to feed a growing population. Diversification is key to a resilient food system, and salsify, my friends, could be one of the players. Think about it. In a world where water is scarce, a crop that doesn't demand gallons and gallons of irrigation water is a pretty attractive option. And in areas where the soil is depleted and degraded, a plant that can still eke out a living is a valuable asset. Now, I know what you're thinking, but salsify tastes, well, like salsify. And you're not wrong. It has a unique flavor. But that's the challenge for chefs and food scientists, to unlock its potential, to find new and exciting ways to prepare and present it. Maybe salsify ice cream? Salsify sushi? Salsify everything? Okay, maybe not everything. But you get the idea. The thing is, we've been here before. Take the humble potato, for example. Originally from South America, it was initially met with suspicion and even outright rejection in Europe. People thought it was poisonous, or that it caused leprosy. Seriously. Talk about bad PR. But eventually, people figured out how to grow it properly, how to cook it, and how to love it. Now, potatoes are a staple food around the world. And I'm sure even the Queen would approve of the tuber's transformation into chips. So, what about salsify's nutritional profile? Well, it's a good source of fiber, vitamin C, and potassium. It also contains inulin, a type of prebiotic fiber that's beneficial for gut health. So, you're not just eating something that's potentially sustainable, you're also doing your gut a favor. Now, that's a win-win. And let's be honest, who doesn't want a healthy gut? But let's get back to our future market. You notice a small stand tucked away in a corner, selling something called Salsify leather. Intrigued, you approach and examine the material. It looks and feels surprisingly like real leather, but it's made entirely from, you guessed it, Salsify fibers. The vendor explains that Salsify can be processed into a surprisingly strong and durable material, which can be used to make clothing, bags, even shoes. Now that is thinking outside the box. Did you know that people have been experimenting with plant-based leather alternatives for centuries? Hemp, pineapple leaves, even mushrooms have all been used to create sustainable and ethical materials. Salsify leather could be another addition to this growing trend, offering a new and innovative way to utilize this versatile plant. But, will it ever be as cool as your worn leather jacket? I guess only time will tell. Historians still argue about the ethical implications of wearing animal products versus the environmental impact of creating plant-based alternatives. There are no easy answers, are there? You walk away from the Salsify leather stand, pondering the possibilities. Could Salsify truly become a multi-purpose crop, providing not only food, but also materials for clothing and other products? It's a tantalizing thought. You see someone trying on a pair of Salsify shoes. They look surprisingly stylish, in a sort of earthy, futuristic way. And he seems happy. I'd be happy knowing my shoes were good for the planet. Now, here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some people believe that Salsify has medicinal properties. Apparently, it's been used in traditional medicine to treat a variety of ailments, from digestive problems to skin conditions. I'm not a doctor, so I can't vouch for any of these claims. But, hey, if it works for you, go for it. Just don't go replacing your actual medication with a Salsify smoothie without consulting a medical professional. Okay. You begin to see a vision of a future where agriculture is not just about producing food, but also about creating sustainable materials and promoting human health. And, in this vision, Salsify plays a starring role. It's not just a humble root vegetable anymore, it's a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and innovation. But let's be real for a second. Salsify isn't going to magically solve all of our problems. There are challenges to overcome. Scaling up production, developing efficient processing methods, and convincing people to actually eat it are just a few of the hurdles. And, let's face it, some people are just going to think it tastes weird, no matter what you do to it. I think it's also important to acknowledge that food trends can be fickle. What's popular today might be forgotten tomorrow. Remember kale? For a while there, it was everywhere. Kale smoothies, kale chips, kale salads. It was kale mania. But now, it seems like kale has faded into the background, replaced by the next big thing. Maybe that's Salsify now. Or maybe it's seaweed. Who knows? But, even if Salsify doesn't become the next culinary superstar, its potential as a resilient and sustainable crop shouldn't be ignored. It's a reminder that there are countless underutilized plants out there, waiting to be discovered and incorporated into our food systems. And, perhaps, one of the greatest jokes ever written about food will be about Salsify. That day will be a great day, a sign of true Salsify culture. We're still waiting, but as you know, anything is possible. As you leave the futuristic market, you feel a sense of hope. The future of food is uncertain, but it's also full of possibilities. And, who knows, maybe one day you'll be sitting down to a delicious Salsify-based meal, knowing that you're contributing to a more sustainable and resilient world. In the meantime, you might want to pick up a few Salsifys at your local farmer's market and experiment in the kitchen. You never know, you might just discover the next great Salsify recipe. And, if you do, please share it with me. I'm always looking for new ideas. Now, how about this? Before you cook, give your Salsify a big hug. No reason, just a little love. Alright, settle down, settle down. We've been digging in the dirt, peeling stubborn skins, and tasting something unusual. And now, the moment of truth. You've swallowed your last bite of Salsify. You've meticulously wiped your chin with that slightly threadbare napkin I offered. What do you think? Did you find a forgotten treasure? Or just confirm why it was forgotten in the first place? I can almost see you furrowing your brow. It's alright if you're not completely sold. Salsify isn't exactly pizza, is it? But maybe, just maybe, it sparked something. A little flicker of curiosity about all the other foods that have faded from our collective memory. Think about it. We're surrounded by this incredible bounty of edible plants, and yet, we mostly stick to the same old predictable lineup. Potatoes, carrots, broccoli, the usual suspects. We're like a band that only ever plays their greatest hits. Sure, they're good songs, but what about those hidden gems buried deep in the album? The B-sides that have a certain, je ne sais quoi. That's what Salsify represents, a B-side of culinary history. A testament to the fact that our ancestors ate a much wider variety of things than we do today. And who knows? Maybe some of those forgotten foods are actually better for us, tastier, or more sustainable than the ones we're currently obsessed with. Let's be honest, our modern food system is a bit of a mess, isn't it? It's all about monoculture, long supply chains, and an obsession with perfect-looking produce. We've sacrificed diversity for efficiency, and I suspect our palates, and our health, have suffered as a result. So, what if rediscovering these forgotten foods is a way to push back against that? To reclaim a little bit of culinary independence? To say, hey, I'm not just going to eat what the supermarket tells me to eat. I'm going to explore the weird, the wonderful, and the slightly earthy flavors that the world has to offer. Speaking of earthy, you know, dirt used to be a lot more common on the menu. People didn't have the same obsessive cleanliness standards we do today. A little bit of grit in your greens was just part of life. In fact, some historians argue that the rise of germ theory in the 19th century, while obviously beneficial in preventing disease, also led to an over-sanitization of our food culture. We became so afraid of germs that we started rejecting anything that wasn't perfectly clean and uniform. Now, I'm not advocating for eating fistfuls of dirt, mind you. But it does make you wonder if our obsession with hygiene has inadvertently narrowed our culinary horizons. After all, some of the most delicious foods, cheeses, fermented vegetables, even chocolate, rely on the activity of bacteria and fungi. A little bit of dirt can be a good thing. Kind of like that time I accidentally planted a packet of petunias instead of radishes. Turned out my garden was much prettier that year. Of course, the challenge with forgotten foods is that, well, they're forgotten. Finding reliable information about them can be tricky. You can't just Google, best way to cook skillet, and expect to get a million results. You often have to dig through old cookbooks, historical records, and obscure academic papers. It's like being a culinary archaeologist, painstakingly piecing together fragments of a lost civilization. Which brings me to a rather curious fact: during World War II, the British government actually encouraged people to grow and eat salsify. With food supplies scarce, they needed to find alternative sources of nutrition. Suddenly, this humble root vegetable was thrust into the spotlight, becoming a symbol of resilience and self-sufficiency. You can imagine families diligently tending their salsify patches, dreaming of creamy soups and hearty stews that would help them weather the storm. Now, I'm not saying we're headed for another world war, but it's comforting to know that salsify has a proven track record of helping people get through tough times. And while we're talking about history, did you know that salsify was once believed to have medicinal properties? Some herbalists claimed it could cure everything from snake bites to melancholia. I'm not sure I'd rely on it to treat a venomous bite, but maybe it does have a calming effect. I mean, just the act of digging in the garden, connecting with the earth, can be incredibly therapeutic. And who knows, maybe there are undiscovered compounds in salsify that have beneficial properties. The plant kingdom is full of surprises, after all. Scientists are still discovering new things about the medicinal potential of plants all the time. Maybe salsify is waiting to be rediscovered by modern science, just like it's being rediscovered by you. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but what's the point? Why should I bother with these obscure vegetables when I can just grab a bag of chips and call it a day? Well, the point is this: food is more than just fuel. It's a connection to our past, a celebration of our culture, and an expression of our creativity. When we limit ourselves to a narrow range of foods, we're missing out on a whole world of sensory experiences. Think about the joy of discovering a new flavor, the satisfaction of growing your own food, the connection you feel when sharing a meal with loved ones. These are the things that make life worth living. And they're all enhanced when we embrace culinary diversity. It's not just about what we eat, but how we eat, and why we eat. The rediscovery of forgotten foods like Salsify is a reminder that we don't have to be passive consumers. We can be active participants in our food system. We can choose to support local farmers, to experiment with new ingredients, to challenge the status quo. It's a way of saying, I'm not just going to blindly accept what's on offer. I'm going to create my own culinary adventure. And let's not forget the environmental benefits. Many forgotten foods are incredibly hardy and resilient. They can thrive in conditions where conventional crops struggle. This means they could play a crucial role in creating a more sustainable and climate-resilient food system. Historians still argue whether the decline in popularity of some of these foods was due to changes in taste, agricultural practices, or simply the convenience of processed foods. Whatever the reason, the fact remains that we've lost something valuable along the way. And it's up to us to reclaim it. So, next time you're at the farmer's market or browsing through a seed catalog, take a chance on something unusual. Try a vegetable you've never heard of. Ask a farmer about a forgotten variety of apple. You might be surprised at what you discover. And who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself falling in love with Salsify. Or, at the very least, you'll have a good story to tell at your next dinner party. Oh, Salsify. Yes, I've tried it. It tastes like, well, it tastes like history. Wind down. Okay, friend, let's just let all those thoughts settle in now, shall we? All the earthy aromas, the whispers of history, the gentle tug of rediscovering something old and new. You don't need to rush anywhere. Just breathe. The images of digging in the garden, of ancient recipes, of curious experiments in the kitchen are fading now, like a dream you can almost grasp. You've tasted the Salsify, and the taste will linger, a subtle reminder of the richness that lies hidden, waiting to be found. Think about the simple joy of discovering something new. The quiet satisfaction of connecting with the earth. The comforting thought that even in the most challenging times, there are always forgotten treasures to be unearthed. The taste of adventure on your tongue. Let your mind drift now, like a gentle breeze through a field of, well, maybe not Salsify, but something equally intriguing. A field of possibilities, of culinary wonders waiting to be explored. Close your eyes, relax your shoulders. Let the worries of the day melt away like butter on a worn, okay, maybe I shouldn't mention butter. But you get the idea. Let go. Surrender to the peace and quiet. Sweet dreams.